Taylor Hayes stood before the gleaming glass facade of Los Angeles General Hospital with a mixture of pride and apprehension coursing through her veins. Just weeks ago, she had accepted an invitation she never imagined she would receive, a return to Southern California, not as a fledgling psychiatrist, but as chief of staff in one of the city's most prestigious medical centers. Leaving the Pacific Northwest behind had been a decision born of heartbreak and betrayal, triggered by the shooting accident that had shattered her sense of safety and sent ripples through her personal life. Now, in this moment, as she pressed the embroidered nameplate onto her new office door, Dr. Taylor Hayes, Chief of Psychiatry, she allowed herself a cautious smile. She had built her reputation on compassion and unwavering insight into the human psyche, and here she would have the resources to transform lives on a grand scale. Yet as she crossed the threshold, her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her head nurse. A new patient in crisis had arrived, calling himself John Doe and exhibiting symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The man was uncooperative, refusing to speak of the event that haunted him, and his eyes darted with a fearful intensity that sent a shiver through Taylor's professional detachment. She donned her white coat and entered the dimly lit consultation room, where John sat hunched on a vinyl chair, shoulders quivering beneath a threadbare sweatshirt. His voice was a whisper of panic when he finally spoke, fragments of memory slipping out in disjointed images. A flash of gunfire, a scream, her face framed by panic and blood. The mention of her own visage forced Taylor's breath to catch in her throat. She recognized that terrified look, her own eyes reflected back at her from across a hospital corridor more than a decade earlier. She drew closer, heart pounding, and asked gently for more details. John recoiled at first, but empathy and Taylor's patient insistence coaxed him into revealing that he had been present at the scene of a shooting in Bel Air. An event he was too afraid to recount until now. The name Bel Air shooting ignited memories Taylor had carefully tucked away, the fateful night she had been caught in crossfire while driving home from an emergency session at the local high school. The moment the world had gone dark and left her scarred both physically and mentally. As she listened to John's trembling narrative, the pieces aligned with her own repressed recollections. John had witnessed the shooter's identity, yet his life had been in danger if he dared speak. The adrenaline of that revelation coursed through Taylor. She realized that this man was the missing witness whose silence had allowed the true perpetrator to evade justice all these years, forcing Taylor not only to abandon Los Angeles, but also to retreat from the intimacy of her relationships, including that with Ridge Forrester. Taylor's chest tightened as guilt and grief mingled. How many nights had she lain awake consumed by nightmares of that accident, never knowing the full story, never daring to probe too deeply? Now, faced with a living testament to her worst trauma, she knew she could no longer hide. She conferred with the hospital's legal team and arranged for John to enter the Witness Protection Program under her supervision. As she guided him through a battery of psychiatric assessments, she felt the boundaries between doctor and patient blur. Her own therapeutic journey interwoven with his. Meanwhile, Ridge Forrester, alerted by mutual friends to Taylor's new position and sensing the emotional weight she carried, reached out to offer his support. Watching her dedication to John's care reignited in Ridge the profound respect and love he had always held for her. They arranged to meet in the hospital's rooftop garden, where the city lights shimmered like distant stars. Ridge confessed his admiration. "You've been through hell and back, Taylor, and yet here you stand, saving lives and confronting your own demons." She looked at him, tears glistening, and admitted that John's case had forced her to confront memories she believed long buried. Ridge placed a steadying hand on her shoulder and pledged to help uncover the truth behind the shooting that had upended both their lives. Together, they discovered that the orchestrator of the Bel Air incident was not a random criminal, but a member of the Marone family, Malcolm Marone, half-brother to Ridge's late mentor and stepfather. Malcolm had harbored a grudge against Ridge's ascendancy within Forrester International and had engineered the shooting to eliminate Taylor as Ridge's anchor, hoping that without her stabilizing presence, Ridge would crumble and Malcolm could seize control of Forrester shares. The evidence lay hidden in Malcolm's financial records and in secret communications he had believed destroyed. Taylor and Ridge assembled the incriminating documents, but each revelation struck Taylor like a blow. Malcolm had manipulated events not only to hurt her but to destabilize the entire Forrester empire. Fearful that Malcolm would retaliate if exposed, Taylor felt the old panic rising in her chest, the same panic that had propelled her away from Los Angeles years before. And now her career, her relationship with Ridge, and the very lives of the people she loved hung in the balance. Determined, she convened a clandestine meeting with Ridge late one night in her office. Under the sterile glare of fluorescent lights, they plotted to unveil Malcolm's treachery to the Forrester board and to the authorities without tipping him off. Taylor volunteered to confront John one last time, encouraging him to testify publicly, while Ridge would secure the financial ledgers from Malcolm's electronic vault. But as they put their plan into motion, Taylor's suppressed memories began to flood back, images of the bullet's path, the sound of shattering glass, Ridge's anguished cry as she collapsed in his arms. Overwhelmed, she staggered, clutching the edge of her desk, and admitted that her psyche might not withstand another confrontation with those memories. Ridge steadied her, reminding her that she was not alone and that together they could face any demon. Empowered by his belief, Taylor pressed on. With the hospital's legal team coordinating with federal investigators, John bravely emerged from the shadows, his testimony unmasking Malcolm's plot. Malcolm, caught off guard by the breadth of evidence, retaliated with threats and intimidation, sending menacing messages to Taylor and Ridge. But the couple stood firm, releasing the evidence to the public in a carefully orchestrated press conference that not only exposed Malcolm's vendetta but rescued John from his silent torment. As news outlets splashed headlines of Marone conspiracy rocks Forrester International and Dr. Taylor Hayes. Courageous witness to justice, Taylor felt a fierce pride in her dual role as healer and crusader. Yet the ordeal had left scars, late nights haunted by flashbacks, moments of crippling anxiety, and the lingering question of whether she could ever return to treating patients without fear. Ridge, steadfast at her side, insisted she take a sabbatical once the crisis abated, while the hospital board, impressed by her integrity, approved her request. In the peaceful valley of Northern California, Taylor began the arduous work of true healing, supported by Ridge's unwavering devotion. Meanwhile, back in Los Angeles, Forrester International emerged stronger, its leadership realigned with Ridge at the helm and Malcolm Marone facing criminal charges. Taylor's triumphant return to the city was marked not by fanfare, but by quiet confidence as she re-entered her office. This time free of hidden traumas, knowing that by saving John Doe she had also reclaimed her own life. In the end, Taylor Hayes had confronted the ghosts of her past, exposed the darkest machinations of the Marone family, and safeguarded both her career and the people she loved, proving that true healing sometimes requires the courage to face the very wounds one has spent a lifetime trying to forget. Months after the storm that exposed Malcolm Marone's treachery and cemented Taylor Hayes's return to the healing work she loved, Los Angeles General Hospital hummed with the steady rhythm of recovery and renewal. Taylor, having spent a restorative sabbatical among the redwoods and vineyards of Northern California, felt her own spirit buoyed by the clarity of distance. But the call of Ridge's world and the unresolved tensions at Forrester International proved impossible to ignore. When Ridge phoned one crisp spring morning to inform her that the Forrester board had voted him back into the CEO position and that the company's stock had surged on the strength of the newly unveiled street art, Infused Couture Collection Co., designed by August. Taylor realized that her heart would never fully rest until every shadow of the past had been exorcised. She returned to LA. Not as a broken witness to violence, but as the woman who had quelled a conspiracy poised to rip apart her family's legacy. On her first day back behind the reception desk at LA General, Taylor's stoic calm faltered only once, as she spotted John, no longer the terrified John Doe, who had fled into witness protection, but a composed young man whose art therapy had thrived under Taylor's guidance. He flashed her a shy smile before disappearing into the ward, a living testament to her professional redemption. Emboldened by hope, Taylor arranged to meet Ridge that evening at Il Giardino Ristorante, their old haunt nestled among orange blossoms and vine-covered trellises. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in bruised hues of lavender and rose, Ridge greeted her with the warmth of a man who had learned humility in the fire of crisis. He slid into the booth opposite her, his tailored suit still crisp despite the week's frenetic board meetings. "Taylor, I've missed you," he said softly, reaching for her hand across the table. "Tonight, I want to introduce you to the new creative council, August, Hope, even Thomas, who surprised us all by pledging his full support. And there's someone else you need to meet." Taylor's pulse quickened as she realized Ridge was about to merge her two worlds. Medicine and fashion, past pain and future promise. Over plates of saffron risotto and aged Parmesan, Ridge told how Malcolm's trial had concluded with a sentence of 20 years for conspiracy and attempted corporate theft, but how the Marone name remained a potent force of influence in Los Angeles. It was that residual power behind the scenes, Ridge confided, that now threatened to destabilize Forrester's fragile unity. Ridge explained that Jacqueline Marone, widow of Ridge's stepfather and Malcolm's mother, had quietly amassed her late husband's shares during the turmoil, positioning herself as a battleground negotiator with the Logans and Spencers. Jacqueline's ambition, whispered rumor said, was to acquire a controlling interest in Forrester International and to install her own protégés on the Creative Council, effectively severing Ridge's ties to the very company he had built. Taylor listened with a measured nod, her professional instincts sharpening as she recognized the contours of another family conspiracy. Ridge continued, telling her that Jacqueline had requested to attend the next Creative Council meeting under the pretense of conciliatory outreach, but that he suspected a more nefarious motive. He wanted Taylor's counsel, first as a trusted confidant and second as the most level-headed mind he knew. Taylor, torn between her duties at the hospital and her loyalty to Ridge, agreed to step into the fray. She proposed calling a closed-door session of the council to discuss Jacqueline's proposal, using the meeting not only to gauge the loyalties of its members, but also to confront Jacqueline directly and set clear boundaries. Ridge's relief was palpable, and as they toasted with a pair of Brunello di Montalcino glasses, Taylor felt the exhilaration of facing danger side by side with the man she loved, rather than fleeing from it. The following week, under a vaulted atrium of glass and steel, Forrester International's Creative Council convened. August stood tall beside Hope Logan, whose resilience since the yacht accident had transformed her into a pillar of strength in her own right, while Thomas, his earlier scheming forgiven but not forgotten, offered an uneasy nod, determined to prove his loyalty. Jacqueline Marone entered last, her chic black ensemble and diamond bracelets a polished facade that barely veiled the steel beneath. Ridge opened the meeting by acknowledging her contributions to the company's charitable arm, then bluntly laid out the board's concerns about her share acquisition. Jacqueline, unshaken, delivered a poised address about her late husband's legacy and her vision for a more inclusive Forrester that honored both couture tradition and street-level creativity. Taylor, seated at the polished oak conference table, watched Jacqueline's every gesture and caught the flicker of steely cunning behind her practiced smile. When Jacqueline finished, Taylor rose to speak, her voice calm yet unmistakably firm. "Mrs. Marone, your involvement in Forrester International is welcome in principle, but the board must ensure that its creative direction remains in the hands of those who understand this house's ethos. The very survival of our legacy depends on authenticity, transparency, and respect for every contributor, whether born into the name or discovering it later in life." She paused to let her words land, then continued, "My own journey from patient to physician taught me that hidden truths corrode institutions from within. We cannot afford another breach of trust. Any further acquisition of shares or board seats by your family must be accompanied by an explicit commitment to abide by our charter, to recuse yourselves from decisions relating to familial matters, and to submit to annual integrity reviews conducted by an independent panel." A hush fell over the room as Jacqueline's eyes narrowed, but Ridge gently placed a hand on Taylor's shoulder, signaling his total support. August gave Taylor an approving smile, and even Thomas nodded solemnly. Jacqueline's lips curved into what might have been the shadow of a smile as she reached for her designer clutch. "Very well," she murmured, her tone guarded. "I accept your terms. For the sake of William's memory, and for the future of Forrester International." With that, the crisis was averted for now. The council proceeded to ratify Ridge's reinstatement as CEO and Taylor's role as strategic advisor on a new mental health initiative for employees impacted by industry stress. The meeting adjourned with a flicker of applause, and outside the boardroom windows, the Los Angeles skyline glowed as if in tribute to the resilience of those who dared to protect their dreams. In the weeks that followed, Taylor juggled her duties at the hospital with her advisory role at the company. She launched Forrester's inaugural Mind in Fashion program, integrating psychiatric support into the frenetic world of design, and she mentored young creatives whose own emotional scars mirrored those she had once carried. Ridge watched her with pride, their partnership transcending the personal to shape a new corporate culture that valued mental well-being as much as aesthetic innovation. Hope and August's relationship flourished under this climate of openness, their collaboration yielding a limited edition capsule line whose proceeds funded arts therapy for at-risk youth. Thomas, having learned humility in the crucible of scandal and redemption, threw himself into philanthropic design projects, forging tentative reconciliation with the Logan family. Meanwhile, Jacqueline Marone's compliance with the council's oversight appeared genuine. Her subsequent appointments to executive committees reflected a willingness to play by the rules rather than rewrite them. Yet beneath the calm surface, Taylor sensed a ripple of unease. Whispers of a silent partner rumored to be bankrolling Jacqueline's share purchases, names that conjured shadows from offshore accounts and shell corporations. Taylor's psychiatric radar, honed on the jagged psyche of trauma survivors, recognized the telltale signs of duplicity, the careful apologies, the meticulously staged generosity, the undercurrent of entitlement that refused to surface openly. She confided her concerns to Ridge during a late-night walk in the hospital's rooftop garden, where the scent of jasmine mingled with the cool Pacific breeze. Ridge listened, his jaw set with determination. They agreed to engage the same forensic team who had unraveled Malcolm's scheme to probe the Marone transactions once more, mapping the web of influence that might yet threaten their fragile unity. And so, as midsummer approached and the annual Forrester Runway Gala beckoned with its promise of glamour and innovation, Taylor Hayes and Ridge Forrester found themselves at the threshold of a new chapter. One in which the battles for power would no longer be fought in hushed whispers and hidden file deletions, but in the open, guided by the unshakable conviction that truth, compassion, and the courage to heal would forever remain the true pillars of both family and fashion.